He was rejected from art school. Twice, he was homeless, sleeping in shelters, eating at soup kitchens. He had no money, no education, no military rank, no political connections. In 1913, just 20 years before he would rule all of Germany, Adolf Hitler was a complete nobody. And yet, in less than 2 decades, this failed artist, this homeless drifter, this man who couldn't even get into college, would start the deadliest war in human history, would murder 6 million Jewish people, would bring the entire world to its knees. How? How does something like that happen? How does one ordinary, broken, bitter man get an entire nation of intelligent, educated people to follow him willingly into absolute evil? That is the question this video answers. Not to glorify him, not to excuse him, but because if we don't understand how it happened, it can happen again. It is happening again. And you need to know the truth. Welcome to Dust Glory, where we go deep into history that actually matters. If you're new here, subscribe right now, because what you're about to hear in the next 40 minutes will change the way you see the world. Let's begin. To understand the monster, you have to understand the man. And the man, the young Adolf Hitler, was defined by failure, resentment, and a desperate need for someone to blame. Born on April 20th, 1889, in a small Austrian town called Braunau am Inn, Adolf was the 4th child of Alois Hitler, a strict, sometimes brutal Austrian customs official, and Clara Hitler, a quiet, devoted mother whom Adolf genuinely loved. His childhood was not a happy one. His father beat him regularly. 3 of his siblings died young. And by all accounts, Adolf was a dreamy, stubborn child who hated school, except for art and history. He wanted to be an artist. He spent hours sketching buildings and landscapes. He was convinced he was destined for greatness. And when his father died in 1903 and his beloved mother Clara died of breast cancer in 1907, he was completely untethered from reality. He moved to Vienna, applied to the prestigious Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, was rejected, applied again, rejected again. The rejection letter called his work unsatisfactory. It was the first great wound to his ego. For 5 years, he drifted through Vienna, sleeping in homeless shelters, selling hand-painted postcards, absorbing the poisonous anti-Semitic politics of the city around him. Vienna in that era was a hotbed of nationalist and anti-Jewish ideology. And Hitler, broke, humiliated, bitter, absorbed all of it. Here's the crucial psychological truth. Hitler didn't become hateful because he was evil from birth. He became hateful because he was a failure who needed someone to blame for his failures. And the propaganda of his time gave him a perfect target. If Vienna planted the seeds of Hitler's ideology, World War I watered them with blood. When war broke out in August 1914, Hitler, then 25 years old and still drifting, volunteered immediately for the German army. And here's something important. For the first time in his life, he found purpose. He found brotherhood. He found meaning. He served as a message runner on the Western Front. It was one of the most dangerous jobs in the war, running messages between trenches under artillery fire and machine gun bullets. He was wounded twice. He was awarded the Iron Cross First Class, one of Germany's highest military honors, for bravery. The war gave Hitler something he never had in Vienna: respect. His fellow soldiers respected him. His commanders respected him. For 4 years, he was not a failed artist, not a homeless drifter. He was a soldier, a brave one. And then, Germany lost. November 1918, the armistice. Germany surrendered. And for Hitler, it was as if the world had ended. He was lying in a military hospital, temporarily blinded by a British gas attack, when he heard the news of Germany's defeat. He later wrote that he wept. He wept like he had not wept since his mother died. And in that hospital bed, he made a decision. He later described it as a divine calling. He would go into politics. He would save Germany. He would find the traitors who had stabbed Germany in the back, and he would make them pay. That is how World War I didn't just shape Hitler. It created him. To understand why Hitler succeeded, you have to understand what Germany looked like after World War I, because it was a nation in absolute ruins, economically, psychologically, and politically. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was brutal. Germany was forced to accept full blame for the war. They lost 13% of their territory. They were stripped of their military, and they were ordered to pay 132 billion gold marks in reparations, an almost unimaginable sum that would cripple the German economy for decades. And then came inflation. Not regular inflation, hyperinflation. By 1923, a single loaf of bread cost 200 billion German marks. People were bringing wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy groceries. Life savings became worthless overnight. The middle class was wiped out. Into this chaos, this humiliation, this desperation, this fury, came a very dangerous myth. Germans began to tell themselves a story. Germany didn't really lose World War I on the battlefield. German armies were winning, but they were stabbed in the back by traitors at home, by socialists, communists, and Jews who undermined the war effort from within. This was a lie, a complete fabrication. Germany lost because it was exhausted, outmatched, and strategically defeated. But the stab in the back myth, the Dolchstoßlegende, gave a broken people someone to blame, and Hitler became its most powerful preacher. He was not the inventor of this lie, but he was its master salesman, and a nation drowning in shame and poverty was ready to buy. In September 1919, Adolf Hitler attended a meeting of a tiny political group called the German Workers' Party. There were maybe 55 people in a Munich beer hall. It should have been completely insignificant. But Hitler stood up to speak, and something extraordinary happened. The room fell silent. People who had come planning to leave stayed. Then they started nodding. Then they started cheering. Hitler discovered in that Munich beer hall that he had a gift. Not for art, not for leadership in the traditional sense, but for something far more dangerous. He was a mesmerizing public speaker. He didn't just give speeches, he performed them. He would start quietly, almost hesitantly, then build slowly. His voice would rise and crack with emotion. He would pound the podium. He would weep real tears. He would channel the rage, the shame, the humiliation of every person in that room and give it a direction, give it a target. He joined the party, member number 555. Within months, he was its most important figure. He renamed it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the NSDAP, the Nazis. He designed the flag, the red background for socialism, the white circle for nationalism, and the black swastika, an ancient symbol he hijacked and twisted into a brand of terror. He created the SA, the Sturmabteilung, the brown shirts, his personal street army of thugs who beat up political opponents and intimidated voters. He built a propaganda machine like nothing Europe had ever seen. Rallies, posters, uniforms, salutes, symbols. Every element was engineered to trigger emotion, create belonging, and make followers feel they were part of something historic and unstoppable. By 1923, the Nazi Party had 55,000 members, and Hitler was ready to make his first grab for power. On the night of November 8, 1923, Hitler made his boldest and most reckless move yet. He tried to seize power by force. It became known as the Beer Hall Putsch. Hitler and his brown shirts burst into the Burgerbräukeller, a massive Munich beer hall where the Bavarian state government was holding a meeting. Hitler fired a pistol into the ceiling, jumped onto a table, and declared, The national revolution has begun. His plan was to use the Bavarian government as a launching pad, march on Berlin, overthrow the Weimar Republic, and install himself as leader of Germany. He believed thousands would rally to his cause. He believed the army would join him. He was wrong. The next morning, November 9th, Hitler led a march of about 2,000 men through Munich. They were met by armed police. Shots were fired, 14 Nazis and 4 police officers were killed. Hitler, according to witnesses, turned and ran. He was arrested 2 days later, hiding at a friend's house. The putsch was a catastrophic failure. It should have ended Hitler's political career forever. But here's where history takes its darkest irony. The trial that followed, the treason trial of Adolf Hitler, became a massive propaganda victory for him. He used the courtroom as a stage. He spoke for hours. The newspapers covered every word. Millions of Germans who had never heard of him now knew his name. He was convicted of treason and sentenced to 5 years in prison. He served 9 months, and in those 9 months, in a comfortable cell with daily visitors and a view of the mountains, he dictated a book. Mein Kampf, My Struggle, his manifesto, his blueprint. He told the world exactly what he planned to do. And the world wasn't listening. After prison, Hitler made a crucial strategic decision. No more coups, no more violence in the streets, at least not officially. He would win power through the ballot box. He would use democracy to destroy democracy. It was a genius move, and terrifying. For the rest of the 1920s, the Nazis built their organization methodically. Local chapters in every city, youth groups, women's groups, newspapers, radio broadcasts, posters. Every single German citizen was being targeted with Nazi messaging constantly. Then came 1929. The Great Depression hit. American banks called in their loans to Germany. The German economy, which had barely stabilized, collapsed overnight. Unemployment exploded to over 6 million people. Banks failed, businesses closed, and desperate people began looking for radical solutions. The Nazi vote share jumped from 2.6% in 1928 to 18.3% in 1930, then to 37.4% in July 1932. The Nazis had become the single largest party in Germany. But here's the crucial fact that gets overlooked. They never won a majority. 37% is not 51%. The majority of Germans never voted for Hitler. But in a fragmented multi-party system with incompetent opponents, a paralyzed government, and backroom deal-making among conservative elites who thought they could control him, Hitler was appointed chancellor on January 30th, 1933. An old conservative politician named Franz von Papen famously told a friend, "We've hired him. In 2 months, we'll have pushed Hitler so far into a corner that he'll squeal." He was wrong. Catastrophically, historically wrong. Within months, Hitler would outmaneuver every single one of them. January 30th, 1933. Hitler becomes chancellor. He is still constrained, theoretically. He leads a coalition government. President Hindenburg still controls the military. The courts are still independent. The press is still free. Other parties still exist. 18 months later, every single one of those constraints was gone. And the speed with which Hitler dismantled German democracy should terrify every person alive today. First, the Reichstag fire. February 27th, 1933. The German parliament building burns to the ground. A young Dutch communist is caught near the scene. Hitler immediately blames the communists and uses the fire to suspend civil liberties overnight. The Reichstag fire decree eliminates free speech, free press, and the right to assembly. In one night. Second, the Enabling Act, March 23, 1933. Hitler forces through a law giving himself the power to rule by decree, bypassing parliament entirely. It passes because Nazi brown shirts surround the building and members of opposition parties are too afraid to vote no. Third, all other political parties are banned. Trade unions are abolished. The press is brought under Nazi control. Universities are purged. Judges are replaced. The civil service is cleaned of anyone not loyal to Hitler. Fourth, the Night of the Long Knives, June 1934. Hitler turns on his own people, ordering the murder of the SA leadership and dozens of political rivals. He does it to secure the loyalty of the regular army. When President Hindenburg dies 2 months later, Hitler combines the positions of president and chancellor into one. He calls himself the Führer, the leader. Total power in 18 months, legally, step by step. Using the very rules of democracy to destroy democracy. This is the question that historians, psychologists, and philosophers have wrestled with for 80 years. And it's the most important question of this entire video. Because the Holocaust, 6 million Jewish people murdered, millions more enslaved, tortured, and killed, was not carried out by Hitler alone. It required the participation, the compliance, or at minimum the silence of millions of ordinary Germans, doctors, teachers, train conductors, bureaucrats, neighbors. How? First, economic hope. When Hitler came to power, unemployment was over 30%. Within 4 years, he had essentially eliminated unemployment through massive rearmament spending and public works. Germans who had been starving were working. The economy was booming. For many ordinary Germans, life genuinely got better under Hitler, at least at first. Second, propaganda saturation. Joseph Goebbels' propaganda ministry controlled every piece of information Germans received. Radio, newspapers, films, posters, school textbooks, all completely controlled. If you have never heard a single voice criticizing a leader, how do you know to criticize him? Third, fear. The Gestapo had files on millions of Germans. Your neighbor could report you. Your colleague could report you. Your own children, in the Hitler Youth, were taught to report parents who criticized the regime. Fear silenced millions who privately had doubts. Fourth, gradual normalization. The violence, the discrimination, the dehumanization of Jewish people didn't happen overnight. It happened in small steps over years. Each step seemed like a slightly larger version of the last. By the time the death camps were operational, the ground had been prepared through a decade of incremental horror. This is what psychologists call the boiling frog phenomenon. And it is why the lessons of Nazi Germany are not just history. They are a warning for every generation, including ours. We began this video with a simple question. How does an ordinary, failed, homeless man become history's greatest monster? Now you know the answer. And it is more disturbing than most people realize. Because the answer is, it was not magic. It was not some unique German pathology. It was not inevitable. It was a combination of economic desperation, wounded national pride, brilliant propaganda, institutional weakness, elite miscalculation, and, most importantly, the willingness of ordinary people to look away, step by step, until it was too late to look away. Every element of Hitler's rise has parallels that historians and political scientists track in the modern world. Economic anxiety driving people toward charismatic strongmen. Propaganda ecosystems that replace shared reality with tribal loyalty. Democratic institutions being hollowed out from within. Scapegoating minorities. Normalizing language about enemies as less than human. This is not a partisan political statement. This is a historical one. The mechanisms that created Hitler are not safely buried in 1933. They are human mechanisms. They live in human psychology. And they can be activated, have been activated, in other times and places. The Holocaust killed 6 million Jewish people, alongside millions of Roma, disabled people, political prisoners, homosexuals, and Soviet civilians. Somewhere between 70 and 85 million people died in World War II. The war Hitler started. One failed art school application, one homeless man's bitter resentments, one nation's trauma and shame, one generation's silence and compliance. That is how it happens. Know history, understand history. Because the only weapon we have against the darkness of the past is the light of truth. This is Dust Glory. If this video changed the way you think about history, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. The next video goes even deeper. I'll see you there.